no, there's an opportunity for us to kind of engage. And I find that is, we live in a world where we're saturated with information. And if you have a question or want to find something, read something or a video or take a master class or a book, and there's a lot of information out there. And one of my favorite quotes that I refer to often when I teach or when I'm learning is that people don't need to be instructed as much as they need to be reminded. So there are truths that we have that we know that we want to bring into our lives. And, very rarely are we here to share anything. I've never heard that before, but sometimes I've never heard it that way before. Or sometimes what happens is that we digest spiritual information through action and through discussion. And the Bhagavad-Gita itself, which is an ancient text on spiritual yoga and spiritual practice, it's a book of action. It was Will Smith who mentioned that, who's read and studied the Bhagavad-Gita, as well as various other spiritual literatures. And he said that the Bhagavad-Gita is so relevant to me because it's one book that's not about a monk or a renunciate. It's about like a guy who has a job and a family and how he navigates this path. And you got these really big spiritual ideals. You're an eternal spiritual spirit soul, and you're not meant to enjoy the things of this world, but you're meant to serve in this world, and the things that come to you are meant to be vehicles of service. And our greatest joy isn't from taking from the world, but in giving back. And and all these ideas of renunciation and not being, I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm something divine. All these high elevated spiritual ideals. But then what does that look like in the context of my life, with my family, with my job, with my hobbies? And what we learn throughout the book is that spiritual information turns into transformation when we act it out. And the way we judge spiritual success is very different than the way we measure spiritual success is very different than the way we measure our material success. So material success is getting something right and looking a certain way. I had a certain outcome in mind and I achieved that. And if you didn't, there's some falling short, some missing the bar, some being behind. Have you ever feel behind in life? Yeah. You were the brave one. Everyone else was like, a little bit. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And spiritual life is very much about we may set material goals. And in some ways, whether or not I achieve those goals is relevant. Because even if I achieve those goals, they will all be washed away in the sands of time. Amen. Jimi Hendrix, castles made of sand fall in the sea eventually. And so there are practices that like Buddhist monks will do, or even in other parts of the world, like, they'll do these beautiful, beautiful sand mandalas. And they'll spend the entire day doing this beautiful sand mandala, knowing that shortly after they make it, the wind or the tide is going to just kind of wash it away. It's like, why do you do that? It's because it shows us that things are important and I should pay attention to detail, and at the same time, I shouldn't be too attached. So this idea of like renunciation and dedication can be hard to measure sometimes, because I feel like, well, if everything is like, we're all going to die, life is temporary, like, why does it matter? I shouldn't get involved in anything. And if I get involved in anything, it almost gets depressing, like everything is taken away. And so this idea of actually this world is almost kind of like, it's a training ground. It's a place for us where we get the opportunity to learn or relearn how to love. And what does it mean to understand who I am and who you are? Because I can't love you unless I know you. And how much do we really get to know people? Not just your material story in this life, but your eternal story before and beyond this life. So spiritual life is so much less of a denial of self and more of a discovery of self, and less about taking in information and learning, and more about applying information so that I can undergo transformation. And whether or not my life ends up looking the way that I said or thought it should, it's what's the transformation I underwent along the way. And that's actually the spiritual success. So it's not that you should not have goals, you should not have aspirations, you should not have yearnings. You need those things. But whether or not you achieve them in the way you think you should or set out to is in some ways sometimes irrelevant, because you can totally achieve everything you set out to achieve materially, but not be where you want to be spiritually, and it's where we are most of us today. You know, I mean, we all know. Yeah, please go ahead. What's your name?
Emilio.
Emilio.
Yeah, I really believe in what you're saying. Yeah, I think a lot of the problems right now is that a lot of people don't have belief in life after death. And people, you know, it's hard to find a direction when you feel like everything is just gonna end and you're gonna be in total darkness and things like that. I'm glad that I always felt like this isn't my home, this isn't my home. I always know that I'm gonna go back to where I really came from. So
Beautiful.
it's nice that you guys are doing this, and I really appreciate this thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Is your name Emilio with an M or Emilio with an E?
Use either, but Emilio.
How do you? What's the first letter?
E.
E. Emilio. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, and we're here to remind each other. And so the point you just made is in reference to where I want to go with us today, because you know, I remind myself that certain things are, we have certain spiritual truths that sit in the back of our minds, right? And then we look at the way we behave and interact in the world. Sometimes, if you're like me, I don't, maybe you guys are like right on par, but usually there's a gap. There's some sort of gap in terms of the aspirations, the values, the things that I set for myself, the way I'd like to behave, the way I'd like to approach my life, the you can say the faith or the belief or the spiritual understanding that I have, and then how it translates into my daily life choices and decisions. And it's really, really hard, like to navigate that today, because we're constantly being pushed away from that. You know, we're constantly, we even have these terms that we use for our attention or our time. You know, give me your time, give me your attention. That stole my attention, it grabbed my attention. Pay attention. We almost use our time and our energy and attention with this language that refers to it like a commodity, something to be exchanged, something to be given or taken away. Like you can steal someone's attention. And how many, it doesn't take long to think like how many people are trying to steal your attention. How are you trying to, like, you know, everything is just like 2 minutes of your time, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. It's like the new ad rule. Like if you can't convey your message in 3 seconds, your ad's useless. 3 seconds. And what does that say to the normal, what's happening to our attention span? And so our ability and our ability to sort of sometimes take a step back and ask the question, what's really important to me? And are my actions and the way I'm living my life aligning to the things that are important to me, is less and less available to us without us putting in specific effort for it. Because it doesn't just happen automatically. You're never going to pop open your phone and start scrolling and be like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to do today. You know, it's like all of a sudden it's like you spent 6 hours on your phone. How is that possible today? Those little notifications. Ever want to give yourself a heart attack? Give yourself the notifications, like how much time. I wasn't even awake that many hours today. How is that possible? Notification off. So the first thing I want to do is because I want this to be a little interactive, is that I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to ask some questions. You're going to turn to a neighbor, and it can be, ideally it would be, yeah, we'll do it like this. Ideally it would be 2 people. So turn to a person and find a neighbor. So that repairs of 2. And if there's an odd person, I'll be your partner. You got 2 partners?
Yes.
Two, and 2. In the black sweater and the person right there, and then the backwards hat with her. Stay back. We'll monitor and watch everybody. We'll record this on my live story. Simple question. We're going to do it like this. One person is going to ask the question, and it's going to be a repeat question. So you're going to ask the question, and the person across from you is going to answer that question. And the person responding, the person asking the question isn't going to say anything. They're just going to, your smile, you say thank you, and then you're going to ask the question again. Make sense? And I'll time you. It'll just be like a minute. It's not going to be too long. And the question is going to be, tell me something that's important to you. Tell me something that's important to you. And if you're shy, just totally make stuff up. I'm not letting this person in. No, I just met you. Why did I sit here? Maybe I should have sat over there. And so tell me something. And when the person asks the question, you're gonna do this for 1 minute. I'll time it, and then you're gonna switch. So you're gonna ask a question, and you're just gonna be present, receive it, say thank you, and then ask the same question again. Make sense? Everybody got it? Okay. My little timer here. Wait.
Who doesn't have a partner? Does everyone?
Okay. Ready, set. Go ahead and introduce yourself first. That's a good idea.
Hello, my name is Andres.
Okay. Ready, set, go.
What is the point? Many things, but if I had to pick one, it's like, because I'm stuck between like happiness and being grateful. I think no matter how turbulent or chaotic or hectic life is, the majority of it is like living life. And then I think that right? And it's like it's very vague because like many things can bring happiness. It's different for everyone. It can be family. Be even something like as shallow as having a
Got 10 more seconds.
yeah, sorry.
Give one more last answer.
You're supposed to say thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Great.
What is important to you?
Okay, all done. Thank your partner, and we're gonna reverse. So now the other person's gonna ask the question. Ready? Are you guys ready to switch?
Yes.
Did you guys do it, or one person was asking the question over and over again?
Yeah. I think I asked it like 8 times.
I think you guys were switching back and forth. Or you guys
Yeah, we did.
okay, if you switch, then just switch. It's supposed to be one person is asking the same question over and over. You don't switch.
Okay.
Okay, if you were switching, then just keep switching. And if you didn't switch, then now you switch. Ready, set, go.
It's good that we didn't switch. What is important?
What's important to me, I guess, is my family. Just like feeling like really building a sense of just like having good times, even if it's small times. We're just talking about the times could be like very short, but you make sure to enjoy time with us. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
What is important is just like enjoying each moment, just appreciating everything that's going on. So like we just appreciate being able to share things.
Okay, 10 more seconds.
And what else?
One more question, one more answer, and then come back into the
I
space.
think it's basically the same question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Where most of your answers, there's no right or wrong. There's just information gathering. This exercise can go different for a number of people. We're gonna have some other questions we're gonna ask and some other partners that you're gonna have, so you can get to meet other people. But where most of you found were the answers short or a little extended? Like how many times did you ask the question, or what were the answers like? Were they short, or were you kind of like taking a sentence or two?
Were extended.
Short, some were short, some were extended. What were some of the short ones?
Family.
Family.
Being of service.
Being of service,
Make sure you get your list done for the day, everything you have to get done.
to-do list, getting things done,
Yes.
getting things done.
Relationships.
Relationships, creativity. Were there any things that were, I mean, not to like private, like anything like specific, like we had relationships, we had family, we had service, like any specifics of those things, like my dog or my, my guitar, anything specific? It's okay if not, just curious.
Yeah, I said my guitar.
The guitar, okay, yeah. Anything else, one or two specifics?
Family.
Family, beautiful. Anything that was more extended? Parents, both of them. Sometimes you never know.
We kept asking, so one time mom, one time dad.
What were some of the extended answers? I heard that there were some that were extended, you mentioned.
Not wasting time.
Not wasting time. Not wanting to waste your time. Yeah, beautiful. How was I'm just curious, what was the experience like of just kind of sharing those answers?
But like I said, like,
Load off. Got it out. Did it. Nice.
Also, I think it was kind of weird that, she answered something which was the most important thing for me. So I don't know, it's like some kind of karma. She was sitting with me and she answered something which was like.
Her parents are important to you? Yeah, no, similar. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how much we share. Actually, it's amazing how much we share. And it's also interesting, sometimes I find when you do these exercises is how much we we live in a world that's so eager, we ourselves, if you're something to do like the world and society, but like we are society, we are people, we're products of society, and we are makers of society. But how much, we love stories and we love to be able to bring things into our reference of understanding. And so in order for us to be able to like create stories and using stories to create things in a reference of understanding, we need people to play certain roles or fit in certain boxes. And so it's so easy. I mean, you can just look around this room and just based off of what someone's wearing, the tone of their skin color, the way they're doing their hair, immediately you can like, put in some sort of idea of who you think that somebody is. And it's so easy to do that. And then you get to like learn about the things that are important to somebody. You get a whole nother lens of the humanity of people and the things that we share. So we're going to do this exercise again, but we're going to add another added element to the question. And it'd be great if you had a different partner. And so we know that there's an even number of people in the room. And so if you had a different person, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. So go ahead and find that person. And then we're going to ask the question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But there should be an even number. There should be.
We tap.
But what's your name?
Siobhan.
Siobhan needs a partner.
Over here?
Other than
Oh, good.
Okay. So now, we are going to, we're going to do a switching back and forth. So this time it's supposed to be switching. So one person asks, another person asks. But now you're going to ask two questions. And the reason we switch is because the first question is going to be the same question. Tell me something that's important to you. And when we ask this question, something that's important to you, I want to invite you to also like put everything on the table. Like it doesn't have, like sometimes we have broad reaching values like family and not wasting time or spirituality or service, etc. Like there are things we think before, but then there's also things like chocolate or there's things like
Say that,
right? But you didn't. Why did you say that?
because I knew we were gonna keep doing this.
She's eating chocolate back there. Chocolate, riding my bike, sunflowers, there could be very, very, think of simple things also. It can be both. But, because there are specific things that are important to me. A certain pair of shoes, my harmonium, my guitar, like there are certain things that are important to you. So you're going to ask this question. The first person is going to ask you to go back and forth. So person A, or whichever the person is, last question, tell me something that's important to you. And the person's going to respond. And then the follow-up question is going to be, why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? And the way that you're going to answer that question, family is important to me because I value fill in the blank. Because I value fill in the blank.
Can I ask a question to you?
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons I did not say chocolate is what is the definition of important? Right, because I love chocolate or like chocolate, but to me, I put ultimately, if I have to live without it, then I can. Then is it really important to me?
Well, that's a great question. I think you can ask, what is the definition of important, or what is the spectrum of levels of importance in my life?
Right, what can you do without? But then, I like chocolate, but if I have to really, if I'm at a point in time where I have to give it up versus my parents, they're important. But yes, so now I'm confused.
Do your parents know that you eat chocolate? Should all get in a circle and have a chocolate meeting. And so I think that's really important. And I think that we'll get into that later a little bit when we start talking about our values and how we make decisions in life. But I think it's important for us to know, because sometimes we have sometimes you don't know how important something is to you until you try to give it up. And sometimes you don't know why something's important to you. And sometimes the thing itself isn't as important to you as something that it represents. And so as an example, like chocolate, chocolate's not that important to that, but there might be something that we value, comfort, or some level of pleasure in our life, or whatever it may be. And we find that there are some things that, there are something. We all have that list of if your house burned down and you made it out alive with these 2 or 3 things, you feel very fortunate, and so in those kind of circumstances, but I think that most of the time we're living our life not in that kind of circumstance. So how do I navigate that? And then how do I also notice what are the big rocks and valleys in my life, and what are the things that are a little bit less important? So there's that story of, asking great questions. So now I'm taking things later and putting them down. We're gonna get it'll be okay. 2 minutes left today, and let's get to your question. There's a story that some of you may have heard, that there's that professor who walks into a room and sets up the class, and then the students start to come in. And when the students come in, there's this big, on the desk at the front, there's this big empty glass aquarium tank. There's nothing in it. And the teacher, she puts in these big rocks, and it fills up with these big rocks. And she asks, is this tank full? And she says, the students say, yes, of course it's full now. And then she takes a bunch of pebbles and she pours it in, and she, it fills in all the crevices, and she goes, is it full? And everybody says, well, now it's full. Then she takes sand and she pours in all the sand, and it fills in all the crevices between the pebbles. It says, now is it full? Yes, of course it's full. Then she takes a jug of water and she pours it in, and it fills in, and literally compresses. And literally, the law of hydraulics, you cannot compress liquid. It's now it's completely full. And she says, what was the lesson of this exercise? Somebody shoots their hands up and says that no matter how full you think your life is, you can always fit more if you try. And she says, that's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to tell you. She says, the lesson is that you better make sure in your life that you put the big rocks in first, because otherwise there won't be any room for them later. And so if you put the pebbles and the sand and the water in first, it's just going to fill everything up. And it's like, crap, where did the big rocks go? And so it's not that we sometimes think, well, it's like if something's minuscule or not that important, well, then what I shouldn't have it. It's like, no, you can have sands and water and pebbles and they serve a purpose and they're allowed to go there. Just to what degree? And so everything in there may be important, but what percentage of space are they taking up in the aquarium of my life? And sometimes we don't choose what's important to us. We let our family or our parents or society or marketing or social media choose that for us. Or sometimes we choose it for ourselves, but we question and doubt, well, that's silly, or that doesn't match what it should, etc. And then we just kind of like get into this like paralysis of just like, I don't know what to do, and just moving forward. And then also we get to this whatever point in our life it may be where it's like, what does it add up to? Or why? And we kind of all of a sudden, who we are, you know, may or may not be the person that we would have painted for ourselves. Or there may be something that we feel is missing. Or we feel a little bit confused in terms of like, or how we make decisions. So I want to ask this question, and this will be an opportunity for us to discuss, and we'll discuss more on the back end. And so, but what I want you to keep in mind is that nothing's too big and nothing's too small. And it's okay to get specific, because sometimes things that are important to us, my mridanga, my harmonium, my whatever it may be, favorite yoga pants, you know, point to something bigger. And sometimes there are things that are important to us that we didn't realize. Or we don't know why that's important to us. Maybe it's not that important. Yeah, we're ready.
The first time we did that exercise was a little difficult, so I'm glad we're doing it this way too. Because the difficulty was I wanted to ask a question and to just listen and just say thank you and then ask the same question again. I did want to know why, so I'm actually appreciate that we're going to this.
Oh, yeah. It's gonna get juicy in that corner.
And we have one more person, so maybe you two can partner since Tiffany came in.
Sure.
Because we are.
Don't accommodate me, I'm chilling, I'm good just listening.
She's listening. She's gonna walk around the room. She's gonna walk around the room. Okay. So you're gonna rotate. So person A is gonna ask, tell me something that's important to you. Thank them, and then why is that important to you? And you can answer the why question however you would like. But one way of answering it is it's important to me because I value fill in the blank. And then after that person says, then you switch and the other person asks the question, both questions, initial and the follow-up, and then we'll go back and forth. I'm going to give this one like 2 minutes so we can have time. Ready? First of all, just introduce yourself because you got new partners. Okay, everybody knows who's going to go first? On your mark, get set. Everybody ready? Yes. Okay, go. Everybody, go. So we're asking questions. What's important? The follow-up question. Why?
Is it
And so these are having discussions. Like discovering what's important. Sometimes we can ask the back of our mind. But the way we live our life sometimes doesn't always line up. Not necessarily but like how we acting lining up with values. That's just like, am I really living the values? So taking time to reflect on letting that guide. First question was just, now you're asking a question, follow up question, like, why is that? My Whoever's asking the question, finish up the set of questions and answers, and then we'll come back into the room.
Those are my rocks. I say that relationship with others, responsibility. It sounds like a lot of
All right, whenever you're ready, finishing up with your questions. Unless you want to just keep on rolling, sounds like some good stuff is flowing. Come back into the space.
Wait, do we have another? So are we? Okay, are you twisting?
You're supposed to be switching. You didn't twist?
We didn't twist.
Okay, one more minute. Keep going. If you didn't twist, twist.
Taking notes. Why is it? And why is that? And then I love Oh, well, yeah, you'll have. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, you guys can finish up wherever you are at. Finish up the question. Come back. And you can, if you want, you can stay where you're at. You can come back and find your original seat, whatever works for you. People are going, are you, we can just do this the rest of the time. We're done. Lunch will be here in an hour. Okay. I'm sweating. Whenever you guys are ready. Keep going if you want. Whenever you're ready. Ready. You can stay where you're at, or if you move, if you move, you can stay where you're at, or you can find your original seat, whatever is comfortable for you. It's okay. I don't think I'll make you get up and move again.
That was fun.
That was fun. Yeah. We extended it because Emily wanted a little more time, and also I think everybody was like going. Great. So, what was fun?
Connecting with others. Like earlier you said, we are the society. We are those people. So really feeling that atmosphere of connection.
Connection. Beautiful. Yeah. Rajarani, was that a little better?
Oh, that was that soothed the soul.
Wow. Anybody find it challenging? Sometimes like everyone's like, that was great, that was amazing. It's like you had a tough time. Like maybe it was just I hated that. What were some of the other general experiences before we get into the the answers or things that came up? Just the general experience.
I think the idea it's like even providing space for someone is very powerful too. Like
Providing space for someone else.
it's also healing. Yeah, it's healing in itself.
Yeah.
Just for me to, like to provide space and also for the other person to provide space for me.
Yeah, powerful, right? And it's also, there's also one of the powers of that. If as you're asking a question, you don't have to say anything. You're like, oh yeah, me too. Or what you can just, there's a prompt and you're just listening and you're holding space without like having to like give advice or tell them what to do with that. Instead of you're just literally holding the space for someone to observe and then having space held for you. Yeah. Any other experiences?
I thought it was interesting having to think about why you value some things.
Yeah, tell me more. What was interesting about that?
Like for example, one of mine was taking walks, but I've never articulated why taking walks is
Yeah.
important to me. So having to like kind of work out, okay, what do I actually like about walks was something new.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. What did you find about taking walks?
I think it's time to be like introspective and just
Yeah.
think about some things, or take time to not think about anything, just whatever I need for myself in that moment.
Yeah, I really love that progression, because sometimes I talk to people sometimes, and like sometimes it's easy to feel stuck sometimes in our lives and thinking that, like, I can't do what I love, or like, I want to be able to, feeling this like, because of certain material circumstances, I'm not able to experience life the way that I want to. And there is some, obviously there are these kind of restrictions that we feel based on our circumstances, whether it's our financial resources or the climate that we're in, or just social systems that exist formally or informally, the body that you're in. But when we really think a little bit deeper, we find like, okay, well, maybe I'm not able to take a walk because of my neighborhood, or maybe because of my body, or whatever it is. But what I actually value is spending some meaningful alone time with myself. And what's a way that I can, and what does that give to me? I need space. I need rest. I need introspection. It's like, that's actually what I'm looking for. Is that something that can really be taken away? Or can I find another way to express that? We'll look at that in another minute. As we go a little deeper, but just one or two other, any kind of just general experiences? Yeah, Emilio.
It's funny because I kind of like combine to like the whole music thing, like you need space for yourself esoterically, like making your own space in the spiritual realm, and just releasing things by being in like nothingness and things like that. Going along with the music, flowing with the music, or going in the walk and flowing with the walk, and becoming thoughtless and mindless. It's a very positive experience.
Thank you. What was it like receiving or hearing somebody else share what was important to them and why?
It's also a relief too.
Relief. How was the relief? What was your name, by the way?
Jitendra?
Jitendra, thank you.
I feel it's a relief because it's like a like-minded, so it's not like I'm the only one going through a certain personal issue. It's somebody else going through the same thing. So when I answer a certain question, the other guy says, "Oh yeah, I'm going through the same thing right now too." So
Yeah,
it's like,
connection.
it's like that relief is like,
Beautiful. Thank you. Any other experiences of receiving or hearing from somebody as they were sharing?
It's interesting because you kind of get to the root of what you're feeling about something.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. What was your name again?
Julia?
Julia shared very beautifully about taking a walk and then finding. What were some of the things that came up that you found that were important to you, and why? Anybody brave enough to share? They're like, listen, I shared with one person. Don't expect me to share with 20.
It's a big jump.
It's a big jump.
Being in the nature was one thing.
Being in nature is one thing.
Yeah, that came to me while talking.
Yeah. And
Forgot about that.
And did you have a why, or why did it support you?
I guess because it just slows my mind down and makes it feel like bliss. It's like my Zen space.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. And back there, what was your name? Alana.
And me and Emilio were basically just talking. We both like music, and he plays guitar, and I play a little bit of guitar, but mostly piano. But we were just talking about how that discipline, like, it gives us a sense of freedom, like a way that we can like learn a certain skill, and like getting to that point where we have the final product. It just feels really good to like see that progression grow as you like learn.
Yeah. Learning, freedom, about a couple of things. Yeah, beautiful. One other person, anybody want to share? Did you find out why chocolate's important to you?
We talked about chocolate. I think going back to the question you asked before that, when you were receiving, what else did you kind of like take in? I think you also you hear why it's important, but I think you see the emotions behind it too, as the person's talking.
Yeah.
If it's something positive, you see the excitement. If it's something a bit deeper, I think you kind of see the emotions, not just hear it.
So one of the things, there's a couple stages I want to move through in our discussion today of how we get to this point of this first section is sort of kind of like discovering our values. And this is just a short little exercise, but something I'd like to invite or offer you when you go home and just during your week is even just take a few minutes a day to just answer this question again. Like write it down and have some reflection for yourself. And this was on the cuff with another person. Maybe there's some things that we should, whenever we're in a public setting, we immediately filter things through a certain lens. But just with yourself, ask this question of what's important to you and why is it important to you? And also when you start to answer the question of why certain things are important to you, you start to notice that there are certain things that fit under a certain umbrella. And so you start to notice these people are important to me. Okay, relationships are important to me. Our family is important to me. Or our exercise, our meaningful alone time. And a huge part of our spiritual journeys is being able to carve out that meaningful alone time for ourselves. Whether it's in, sometimes maybe even if we have like a meditation practice or a reading practice, but also that time where we're actually just spending time to understand like how I think about a situation, what I feel about how my life is going right now. Because we're such like we're conditioned in so many ways more and more today to respond to things immediately, like immediately swipe right, swipe left, like, comment, share, without really thinking about like, and then moving on to the next thing and giving space for us to actually kind of process what we think about something. Because you're supposed to have an immediate response right away in a lot of situations. And so asking yourself what's important to you and why, and then you start to kind of create your bigger picture. You start to identify like, what are the big rocks in my life, the big values that I hold? And then being able to, whether it's a word or an affirmation or some reminder of like, what's actually super valuable to me. And then we are able to kind of, the next kind of section of this kind of process is knowing my values, and then now learning and moving into the realm of being able to express my values. And expressing not just in what I say, but like in how I live. So it's like now, okay, spending meaningful alone time to me is important. Where am I expressing or demonstrating that in my life? Family is important to me. Where am I expressing or demonstrating how family is important to me in my life? Time in nature is important to me. Where am I expressing or demonstrating that nature, time in nature is important to me? And so we're able to actually do a little bit of an audit in terms of like, how am I actually spending my time? And how is the way that I'm spending my time being influenced or flowing in the direction of the things that are important to me? And we start to identify the small things. Because initially when we do this exercise, sometimes what happens is sometimes we get flooded with guilt and shame. It's like, well, I'm not doing anything. Thanks, Dayal. I feel terrible about myself now because I value family and I haven't called anyone in my family for weeks, But we start to identify, because we start to identify the things that we know we want to move on and then know that we want to make some actual change on, or where we want to be. And it's not a matter of like guilt induced, but just become inspired and excited about our life. We as living beings, as eternal spirit souls, are meant to be growing and evolving. And there's that sense of us there's that unlimited nature of the soul. And so there's this sense of eternal growth and development. And so this sense of not necessarily being what I want to be is not a sense of being behind or failing, but it's a sense of like, now I identify the direction that I want to move in. And I understand the things that will help guide the decisions that I make in life. So take the time for yourself to be able to write those things down. What's important to me and why. And then once you kind of have that bigger picture for yourself, you want to be able to ask yourself the questions like, where do these things show up in my life? And where is the small ways that I could start to bring them into my life more? Because they're already showing up somewhere. You're already taking a walk, you're already doing something in nature, you do have some connection with your family. But then there's also the sense of like, what are the small ways that I can stretch myself to bring this into my life in a more profound and regular and consistent way. And it's important to always start small because you want to set yourself up for success, starting small in some way. So expressing your value. And I want to get to the next section here. And this is something that in some ways is kind of the heart of the discussion and the hardest takeaway, but the essential part of the equation. And this is where the idea of boundaries comes into place. The big B word. Being able to set boundaries for ourselves, living a values-based lifestyle requires a certain level, our ability to set boundaries for ourselves, because boundaries is something that is meant to, we normally think of like, okay, if somebody's like toxic in my life and they're treating me so terribly, I have to set a boundary, you know? And so we think of boundaries like a last resort, you know, of like, no, like this big, you know, hand, like, you know, that you're not allowed to come across. But they don't have to be, boundaries don't have to have barbed wires. You know, we set boundaries all the time. And the idea of the boundary is that it protects something that's valuable. And so when I think of, for example, like a glass of water, and you pour water, like what keeps water in a glass? It's the glass itself. There's boundaries that hold that structure in place. And so if you pour water onto a empty table, what happens? It just dissipates. It flows all onto the table. And so the reason that a river flows in a particular direction, the reason that a glass of water holds its shape in a glass is because of the boundaries that are set that direct it, that flow it in a certain way. And so we all want our life to flow in a particular direction. It was George Harrison who wrote a song, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. It's something that can sound like exciting, like a Rolling Stone gathers no moss, and I love to travel, and woohoo, and beautiful, this and that, and it's like untethered. But we all reach that point of like, well, where's my life going? You know, what is this adding up to? And so if we want our life to flow in a certain way, what does it mean for me to set the boundaries that I need to set in order for me to move in the direction that I want my life to move in? And even in the yogic tradition, you know, in the Vedic culture in Sanskrit, this word is referred to as sadhana. So you have these three big words, these S words in Sanskrit, in yogic tradition or in Vedic philosophy. This idea of a sadhya, a goal. There's the idea of a goal, which in Sanskrit is known as this word sadhya. S-A-D-H-Y-A, sadhya, meaning there's a goal in mind. There is an ocean of aspiration that the river of my life is, I want to flow towards. I want the river of my life to flow towards this ocean of a particular aspiration, where I want my life to be. I want to be a certain way. I want to grow in a certain way. I want to experience life in a certain way. And I want my life to flow in this way. And then based on that goal that we set, how often do we actually take the time to set a certain goal based on our values? And again, that goal is not some external material thing that I want to achieve, because we discussed in the beginning, we may set that goal and you may achieve that or not, you know? Yeah, go ahead. Siobhan?
Hi, yes, what would you say would be the healthiest way to create boundary? Would it be that boundary that is created through experience? Because if we create the boundary, there's a lot of room for error.
You want to give an example, or how you would?
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you know, with creating our own boundaries, in there is our discriminations, our prejudices, things we didn't even know about ourselves that are ugly. All of that is going in there.
Yeah.
And then you run the risk of making a really bad boundary for yourself that can become toxic. So what if the boundaries that are created the healthiest way possible are through experience? Like how would you go? How would you recommend like
someone who practices Hinduism to go about creating boundaries?
It's a good question. And I think that there always has to be, we have to accept that we have to be willing to allow ourselves to make mistakes. And the same for others as well. And I think that's where it goes back to this idea of being very, very clear about what's important to me and that introspect. Like when we have time to take introspection, then we'll be able to course correct. Make decisions, make mistakes, course correct when you need to. But when we become so rigid of how we think something's supposed to be, we ask ourselves, like, is this actually serving what I want to be? Is this serving where I want my life to go? Is this serving the value that I determined for myself? Or is this just serving some external shell of the way I said things are supposed to look? And I'm holding on to a shell, I'm holding on to the idea of a relationship, I'm holding on to the idea of a career, I'm holding on to the idea of what character means, I'm holding on to the idea of what spiritual practice means. And so, we have this idea of this goal that we set in mind, and then we have this idea of this practice that I set in mind, which is called this word sadhana that I mentioned. And sadhana specifically relates to the goals in our spiritual life. And so it also depends on, as you're mentioning, like we may have various levels of goals that we set. And in the light of this, so what was your name again?
Jignasha.
Jignasha. And so that some things may be more or less important to us. And so it's not as big of a deal if I mess up or screw up on this level, because I'm actually reaching up here. And so for us to get like super clear on what our highest aspirations are. And then what we're able to do is we're able to set, because boundaries aren't just things that we set with other people. They're also things that we set with ourselves. There's standards of behavior, and something that I'm like, the question to ask when it comes to setting boundaries is, what am I trying to protect? What am I trying to protect? One second, what am I trying to protect? Because that's, at the end of the day, how we set them for.
Thank you so much.
And so a boundary is like not necessarily in how people treat you. Boundary is like the time I go to bed, the time I spend on social media, the types of accounts that I follow, how much news I take in,
Your daily diet.
your daily diet. And so sometimes we get caught up on our routine and we think I do this with this, but what am I serving to protect? And what we end up sometimes, and at this is a, well, go ahead, Amelia, you had your hand up and then I wanted to share something.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, how do you forgive?
How do you
I find myself, I do know how to set boundaries, but it seems like sometimes I myself, like I might take it too far and I might be resentful, but it could be many years later and still hold on to resentment. I'd like to let go of that.
Yeah. I'll hold on to that question. Yeah, you can answer.
So boundaries, right? I mean, like we're saying, it's sometimes associated with negative, toxic things, oftentimes.
Yeah.
But then, like you mentioned, you have to set boundaries for yourself. But then don't you kind of need boundaries with what you value as well? Because that's the whole attachment. Because if I don't set boundaries with what I value and those things go away, then you crash.
Explain what you mean balance.
Family. If family goes away and that's something I value a lot, then what am I going to do after they're gone?
Okay.
When your values and things that you think are important to you are gone, that's not a good place to be in either. So don't need boundaries with what.
So you don't come too attached to something so that you don't end up hurt because.
And this is why I don't do what's important. I don't want to think about it. So yes, it's good to think about it, but it's not because it scares me.
Good to ask yourself
Which is
why it's
what you were
scarce.
mentioning in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is the virtue of impermanence.
So
But
glad you asked that question. It relates to what I wanted to share next because, at the end of the day, this is soul talks, and so we want to relate this to our spiritual pursuits and our spiritual journey. So I'm going to address what you just said, and then I'm going to elaborate on something. It's quite interesting in the Bhagavad-Gita that Arjuna, the main character in the Bhagavad-Gita, is having this existential crisis. He's almost having this kind of crisis of values of why am I doing what I'm doing? And it seems that the purpose for why I'm doing it isn't adding up or justifying the means. And I don't know if I should be doing what I'm doing. And he's questioning himself and questioning his occupation and his duty and his sense of right and wrong. And he asks, what should I do to Krishna, his charioteer and his friend? And then the whole Bhagavad Gita is that response. Bhagavad Gita is that response. And what's interesting is that before he answers the question, what should you do? He first answers the question of who you are. Who are you? Because the role that I play is very much dependent upon what action I should take in any given situation. And so he gives the broadest answer. He says, I'm going to answer this question for you in two ways. I'm going to give you a very broad answer and give you a very specific answer. And the broadest answer is the same answer that's true for everybody. You're an eternal spirit soul. You're not your body, you're not your mind. You're not the brother or sister, or you're not your hair, you're not your body, you're not your occupation, you're not your clothes, you're not your skin color, you're not your anything. You're none of that. You're something eternal. And then later on, he also mentions, which is very interesting, he says, and you also have a body and an occupation and duty in this life.
right.
He uses these terms, he uses the term dharma specifically. And there's this idea of a sanatan dharma, which means eternal, and our swadharma means like my identity in this life. And he mentions that given your specific identity in this life, this is what you should do. Somebody else may do something totally different, but context matters. But when he's still explaining this kind of eternal, broad identity of who you are beyond this life, he gives this really beautiful definition about truth and illusion. And he uses this word, sat. Sometimes we say Om Tat Sat or Sat Chit Ananda, the soul is Sat Chit Ananda, eternal, full of truth and full of bliss or joy. And the word for truth and the word for eternal are the same in Sanskrit. Or the word for real and the word for eternal are the same, the word sat. And asat, which is the opposite of truth. No, I'm good. And maybe some water, yeah. Are the word for false and the word for temporary are the same. And so this idea of what's real is that which is eternal. And that which is false is that which is temporary. He doesn't use the word good or bad. He doesn't use the word, saintly and evil. He doesn't even go to a place of judgment. Just says that which is real is that which is eternal. That which is eternal is that which is real. That which is temporary is that which is false. That which is false, that which is temporary. And you can think of that in terms of identity. My body, my relationships, my hair, you can change your hair, your nationality, you can change your nationality, your occupation, your location, your residence. I am such and such. I'm from California, greatest country in the world. Take a lot of pride in that. Go back and visit my hometown, it's where I'm from. I'm also from New York. I've been in New York a decade and a half. I'm a New Yorker. I get the best of, people say, do you miss California? I'm like, no, I get the best of both worlds. All my family's out there. And so, identifying where I'm from or where you're from can change. Yeah, Julia, you got something to say, your question.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and also, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but the question about tying the boundaries with the value. But I was thinking about the example that you gave and how family, your thinking members of your family would lose, and then that value's gone. But I think going back to like one of the things I was just like thinking about was, if family is your value because having a sense of a tight-knit community is your value, then it's not attached to a member of the family, it's not attached to mom, dad, it's attached to the idea of a tight-knit community. And that wouldn't go away with one person. It would, you could keep building it. So anything that would be true of any value, so like just using the walk example, if having a moment of introspective is a value, then even if walking goes away for me, I could still find that value in something else.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why we put the why part.
Right. The why part. Yeah, and when we really get to family, did you have your hand?
Yeah. Question, but after you finish.
Okay. This idea of connection, of a sense of belonging, a sense of and even mentioned this idea of connection just with another person, something that's been so challenged during this time of COVID is our sense of connection and proximity and just being with other people. And so what we're being called in spiritual life is not to negate or eliminate our relationships, but take them to a deeper level. And what does that mean to relate on a deeper level, recognizing that something that exists beyond this life?
So actually, when I was coming in today, one of the things I was thinking of last night was attachment.
Yes.
I do have a problem with that. I'm like really hard to, I don't open myself up that much, but once I do, I get attached really fast. So I think through this, I'm realizing the difference between attachment and things that you value because of why you value.
Yeah.
It's, well, if I value something, I'm getting attached to it, but I think I'm starting to see a difference.
Yeah, thank you. I want to respond to that. You also had a question.
Yeah, I'm so confused with the boundaries part. I was always taught that boundaries are like a certain bondage. So I read in certain books that like if you have boundaries, it's like identification. And I also taught that identification of under suffering. So that my mind is like the base of my suffering, whether you're physically suffering from the body or mind. Are these all boundaries? So like shouldn't we expand to boundlessness? Like what both boundaries are?
Yeah, good question. So understanding the layers of our identity is also an important part of spiritual teachings. And so we ourselves as individual spirit souls are boundless in nature and are eternal. We're eternal, it's no beginning, no end, we're boundless. And yet at the same time, I'm encased in a material body and I have a material mind. I don't just have a body, I have a mind also. My thoughts are not reality. Because I think something, it's the operating system that I have. Ever had this thought of like my relationship to my thoughts? We don't realize how quickly a thought comes in and I just think it's reality. You know what I mean? The judgment you place on yourself, like being silly or stupid or whatever it may be, or like people don't like me or they said something. Anybody ever have somebody send a text and all of a sudden you think there's like this meaning associated with this? Like, oh, they sent that text in that way. I don't think they really like me. Why? Because they didn't put an exclamation mark after the there are too many exclamation marks. It's like, what? Or somebody said, well, they sent me this so-and-so doesn't like me. Why? They sent me this email, and you read the email and you're like, they were just telling you they're gonna be late. And so because there's a story that's going on, it's like, oh, wait a second, hold on. There's this story going on in my mind, and that's just an old record playing, and I can separate myself from that. And my mind, the function of the mind in Vedic psychology is very simple. It's two things. It's to accept and to reject. This is good, this is bad. This is pretty, this is ugly. This is tasty, this is disgusting. I like this, I don't like it. So the function of the mind is just to accept and reject things. And the intelligence is the faculty of discrimination, discernment. That, okay, my mind is saying that I like this. So the mind can come under the jurisdiction of the intelligence or the body. right? We all have that experience. 2 o'clock in the morning, there's some cheesecake still in the fridge. Your body is somehow all of a sudden standing at the fridge. Your mind is saying, this is a very good idea. I mean, there's blueberries in it. Blueberries is a superfood. And your discernment's coming in like, you've already eaten 3/4 of the cheesecake. That did not end well. Why do you think the last quarter is going to go well? And it's like, you're trying to figure that. What's that? She knows what I'm talking about. She's like, I've been here.
Very descriptive.
Very descriptive. That was very recent. I'm here because I did not eat that last quarter cheesecake. No. You know what I mean? Or whatever it may be. I mean, it could be on a humorous level, and it can also be on a very serious level. I mean, that's the definition of addiction. It's like, I don't want to. I'm not anymore. I mean, I can tell you personal stories of people I know, people in my own family, where addiction is just ruining a family. A father wants to be there for his kids and family, but he just can't. He's not. And it's just like it can wreck a life. And so it's this idea of that, who's really in control of the operation? Would like to be, right? So even amongst your discernment, your intelligence, well, how does your intelligence know what's good for you or not? How am I sharpening my intelligence? So much of a Vedic lifestyle, the yoga lifestyle, is this idea of handing the keys over to my higher self. That is the purpose and definition of boundaries in spiritual life. That is the meaning of the word sadhana, or spiritual practice. That is actually the meaning or the purpose of religion. Anybody know what the word yoga means? Like literally the actual, what it means? Like union. Comes with the Sanskrit word yuj, to unite, to connect, to bring together. They say there are 3 major yogas. So yoga isn't necessarily a spiritual word per se. Sometimes it can be an astrological term, where like 2 planetary systems are coming together. It's called a yoga. And so there are 3 main yogas of when the egg and the sperm come together as a union, when the breath and the heartbeat come together at the beginning of life, and at the end of life, if we achieve in this life or another a liberation, the union of the connection of the soul with the Supreme Spirit. So there's this journey. And so, but in the meantime, the soul is encased in, how does the intelligence know what's right? Well, advertising, social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The values that we create, it's telling us one way. But the soul is actually higher than even the intelligence.
Because the intelligence bargains.
Intelligence bargains.
The soul doesn't.
They say that justification is a service provided by the intelligence to our false ego. Justification is a function of the intelligence in service to our false ego. Ego means identity. We have an identity. It's not this body. It's not this. I was wondering, is this the right sweater that I should wear? Should I wear something more professional? Is this too casual? Maybe casual is good. I want to be like the people. It's like, we have all these things of like what I should be wearing, So it's like we have all this sense of what should I wear? Who am I? And am my clothes? And I am my whatever it might be, This. I'm not a 37-year-old, Italian New Yorker, from California, whatever it may be. And so we have an actual ego. We have an eternal self. The false ego literally means the false self, the illusory self. And what is the word for illusion or falsity?
Maya.
Asat or Maya also, but what is the definition? That which is temporary. I'm not going to wear this shirt forever. You see me tomorrow and the day after wearing the same sweater, say something to me. Call my wife. Let somebody know. And so this idea of things changing. And so what happens is, so often we have to set boundaries to know who's in control. Because otherwise, and this is the purpose of the word definition of the word yoga, which means to connect. The word religion literally means to relink. Religio means to reconnect, to relink. We think religion is like some cultural curiosity about like what clothes you wear and how you do your hair and where you're from and how many times a day you pray, or what's the name of your, what's the name of the God, which God do you worship? And so not knowing that there are unlimited names of divinity, just like the sun. Sun has an unlimited number. The sun doesn't have an unlimited number of names, but there's a lot of them. If you have languages in the room, how many languages we got in the room other than English? Gujarati. How do you say the sun in Gujarati?
Surya.
Surya.
Is that Hindi? I don't know.
Similar? Yeah, Surya. Any other languages?
Spanish.
Sol. Anything else?
Mandarin.
Sorry, Mandarin. How do you say sun in Mandarin?
太阳.
Very different, right? And so we're referring to the same sun. What sun are you looking at? The sun I'm looking at. Different sun. And also there's this idea of we experience the sun based off where we are in this world. I'm from California. Beautiful sunsets. I moved to New York, went to the Jersey Shore around 5 o'clock. Something looked funky as I was going over that ocean. Something was weird. I wasn't digging it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, the sun is setting over there. It's setting over the land. Call my mom, tell her we had it wrong this whole time. She was like, New York is changing you, my son. I'm getting worried. Just got to come home soon. I was like, and I have to call my friend Cindy in Nashville. She's like, what are you talking about water? There's just land everywhere, So my experience of that same sun, which we can call so many different things, is differentiated by where we even stand on the planet. How many hours a day do we experience the sun? Somebody up in Scandinavia is like, what are you talking about? I haven't seen the sun in weeks, because it's just dark. It comes out a couple hours a day. So similarly, our experience of God, of divinity, of supreme spirit, it differs based off of our particular life circumstances or where we're from, or and we get into these arguments about which one is real or not, And so religion is literally meaning that process to reconnect ourselves. The word religion and yoga literally mean the same thing. And so our spiritual practice really is a set. And so when we have all of these different values, right? We have all these different values, things that are important to us and why they're important to us. But at the end of the day, when we keep going up the ladder, we realize that actually what's most important to me are things that are connected to my truest and realest and deepest identity, that of the soul. Because I know that actually can never be taken away. And that's what's real. And that's who I am. And that's what I want to invest in and protect. And so the lifestyle that I take up is simply meant to create that awareness and deepen that understanding and to protect that. Because the environments the environments we put ourselves in shape our values and what is important to us. And so spend enough time, around certain type of people, you'll start to think what's important to them is important to you. This happens, And so the idea of like that highest value, that highest aspiration, spiritual life, let's check my timer. Spiritual life is that process that protects the things that I find most value, and allows me. It creates this deep impression of the mind and the heart. So it goes into that question of where am I investing? Where am I investing in the things that I've determined are important to me? And we sometimes, the reason why things like religion, get such a bad rap is because we've sacrificed the substance for the form, for the shell of it. And so we think that it's following a certain X, Y, and Z perfectly. And we bring our material consciousness right into our spiritual life. What I was saying at the very beginning, that things need to be performed a certain way without realizing, like, is this actually achieving the goal that I set myself? Am I becoming a more loving person? Am I having a deeper understanding of who I am and the people around me? Or am I just, performing in a certain spot? And then what happens is we get to this place where it's like, well, I'm spiritual, not religious. And like, do whatever you want and nothing really matters. And it's like, okay, well, now my life is just who's really in control now. If it feels good, do it. It's like, well, feels good to what? Feels good to and that cheesecake feels pretty good, or this feels pretty good. It's like, well, who's running the show of my life? It's a huge question. And when we ask that question, what's important to me? Sometimes you dig deeper into it, and you find that there are things that are important to me that aren't really important to me, but somebody told me it's important. I've been pretending that it's important my whole life, but it really isn't to me. It's major. And so this sense of being able to really spend time to find what's important to you, those universal values, and to recognize that living my life in a values-based mindset will require me to also learn how to shift the tides of control, where my body's leading me, where my mind is leading me, how my intelligence thinks about things, and bringing it back under, Krishna mentions in the Gita, bringing it back under control of the higher self. Yes, Rajat.
You, I think this is connected to what you're talking about. You started to introduce the 3 S's, and we talked about Satya, the goal.
Yeah.
What are
Could someone bring me a copy of the Gita that's there?
Yes.
Not you, because I want you to ask the question.
What are the other, what are the other 2,
What are the other words?
Spanish? What are the other words and the concept that you're talking about them?
Yeah. So there are these 3 words. There's the goal, which is known as the Satya. Like, my life has meaning and purpose and where I want to be. And then sadhana is that process. And sometimes, this relates to your earlier question, like I said a bad boundary. Is it actually achieving the goal? And so when we get caught up in this idea of the rules and regulations of spiritual practice without the sadhya in mind, without the goal in mind, it just becomes what we consider mundane religion. What is the purpose of that? But actual, genuine spiritual practice, which is the purpose of any religious path, is I'm meant to be achieving something high, aspirational. And so there's sadhana, which is the practice, which isn't a set of rules, it's a set of processes that will lead me somewhere. And then somebody who's doing those things is known as a sadhaka, a practitioner of sadhana. And so what I wanted to share at the end of the Gita, to share a verse from the Gita so that we can take something home with us. It is this, let me just see if it's here. Yes. It's the end of the 3rd chapter. And he gives this hierarchy of layers of identity. The last 2 verses in the 3rd chapter of the Gita. And some of this language is unpacked the way that it's phrased here, may be technical. But he says the working senses are superior to dull matter. So the senses are just like, the things that we experience life with, the way I experience life, sense of touch, taste, etc., are superior to dull matter. And the mind is higher than the senses. So the mind can, the mind decides that I like something, and now my senses are like, okay, we're getting everybody on board, let's move towards that. I'm not standing in front of my fridge at 2 in the morning thinking about drinking pickle juice because my mind says that's gross, and my mind says this is tasty. And what's interesting is that we think that there's like some absolute reality of like, this is what it's supposed to be, but our mind is actually so fickle because there's no absolute sense of like, this is, beauty, for example. We see beauty's in the eye of the beholder. That's a deep Vedic psychological observation that your mind tells you something's beautiful. And then all of a sudden your mind says that's not beautiful. And your understanding of beauty can get so skewed. I think he's so handsome. And then you realize that he's like a jerk. It's like, he's not so handsome anymore. He cheated on me. He's the most disgusting human being in the world. I can't stand to look at him. He's the same physical combination of chemicals that you just saw before that you were just swooned over. And all of a sudden it's like repulsive. What changed? Your mind. You know? You ever eat at a restaurant, it's like, it was so good, you walk out, you're like, oh, that is C rating? Oh, it's so little, you know what I mean? It's like, why? It's the same food, but all of a sudden your mind is thinking, what was in that? What was in that burrito? You know, the same stuff. It wasn't that because of whatever was in there or not in there. It's like your stomach is sick because your mind is telling you something. So whether something's tasty or not tasty, or you know, what was in that? Oh, my sister, I remember when I was a kid, you know, I read the ingredients of the stuff that she would eat. And she would, don't read it to me. I don't want to know what's in there, you know? And so, you know, our mind is telling us something. It's good or bad or tasty or not. It's like, it's totally arbitrary. Completely arbitrary. Pleasure, physical pleasure is a completely arbitrary sensation. I mean, on every level, you know, sex is a mental pleasure. It's not a physical pleasure. You know what I mean? You know, there's certain people that, you know, the idea of sexual intimacy sounds really good. Different people, that gets really, really weird. Why? Because mentally, it's okay to have sexual intimacy with these people, not these people. It's not a physical pleasure. Our mind conditions us into what feels good, what allows me to feel good or not. There was that episode of Seinfeld. George is he's engaged, and his fiance. George is engaged his fiance, and she has this doll collection. And one of the dolls looks exactly like his mother. He must have made the doll for the TV episode because it's like it's a replication of his mother. You know, and there's one point where like they're snuggling in bed and at night, and the doll's like, she likes to sleep with the dolls, and he turns over and his mother's like, what is that doing here? And like ruins him, he can't get into it, ruins the mood, you know? Like, why? It's the same, it's a physical pleasure. Because now I'm thinking of my mother. My mother in the room is just weird. I can't do that, you know? And so it's like this idea of like our mind conditions what we even find pleasurable or not. So the mind is superior to the senses. Because my senses don't even know what's pleasurable or not until my mind tells me. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. So because the intelligence has discernment, and it can say, you know what? Your senses are telling you this is good. My mind says, yes, I should do this. And your intelligence says, nah, that's not such a good idea. Or the reverse. I know you don't feel like getting up and exercising right now, but you're gonna be glad that you did. You should keep going. You should move through this. You know, so the intelligence has that higher discernment. And the soul is even higher than the intelligence. That inner knowing. But how do I get in touch with that frequency of the soul? I have to clear out the noise. I have to clear out the noise. And the way that I live my life and the things that I invest in, participating in spiritual, it's why we do kirtan. It's why we do kirtan. Because kirtan is just like plowing away the rubble that is burying the layer of the soul. It's piercing through all of it. It's why we read spiritual literatures. It's why we do service. It's why we do all of these things. And spiritual life is not meant to be this material life balance. Spiritual life is meant to integrate into every aspect of our life. How we engage in relationships, how we engage in diet, the career choices that we make, etc. How we show up in the world. It's not because if I do this, it's good. If I don't do that, it's bad. It's because I'm trying to clear away the noise so that I can actually get a strong frequency of my divine inner self. Because otherwise, somebody else is running the show. And therefore, the last verse of the 3rd chapter. So, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental, superior to, beyond matter, senses, mind, intelligence. O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence. spiritual intelligence, and thus by spiritual strength conquer the insatiable enemy known as, and the Sanskrit word here is kama, and the English translation uses lust. Not lust just in a sexual sense, but lust in the sense of where my mind and senses is taking me away from myself. Is my higher self guiding the ship? And so in spiritual life, we want our higher self to be guiding us at all times. You can call that a values-based life. Things that are important. I want my, and there are different levels of things that are important to me. That may or may not be related to my higher self, and that's okay because they're part of the equation in this life as I'm getting there. But ultimately, the biggest rock is that spiritual investment of recognizing my higher self and wanting to give the microphone, that piece of ourselves, and learning to tune out the noise and distraction for everything else so that when tough decisions need to be made in my life, I have a guiding compass. I have a compass. And I think that where we see ourselves today is that we are experiencing the repercussions of a world that is severely lacking a compass, of leaders that are severely lacking a compass. Sometimes in family, many of us may be in a very different place in life if our parents or caretakers had a certain compass. Maybe our life would be in a different place if it had a certain compass. Or some of us are building a certain type of compass, and we're seeing the benefits of that. Or some of us are where we are today because our parents and caretakers had a certain compass. We're benefiting from that. And so we ourselves initially, at least on an individual level, we can enact that change by finding that personal, spiritual, and moral compass that is guided by our higher self. And it begins with recognizing that actually, I'm not completely free. I'm being dragged around a little bit. My old stories and misconceptions and desires that have built up. But I want to be free. I want to be, as Jitendra said, boundless and untethered. But I'm not. I got some shackles. Why? Because I've invested in them over time. Maybe not even intentionally. So spiritual life is that reclaiming of our inner self and being guided by that inner self and creating space for us to listen to that inner voice more to become stronger. That's the purpose of spiritual life. That's the purpose of yoga. That's the purpose of religion or any spiritual practice. That's why we're here in this room. That's why we're all here together. So I'm super, super grateful for each of you. I'm really, really glad you guys are here. And I would love to, it's already 1 o'clock, so we're right on the dot. Right on the dot. I would love to just chant a few mantras of kirtan together because I feel like that really solidifies. You know, and we can even just, it can just be just the harmonium in our voices. And to give us a chance to commit to that inner part of ourselves and just kind of take a moment, close your eyes and feel your heart beating. The heart is the resting place of the soul. And so that soul is accompanied by the Supreme Soul. In Sanskrit, we use the words Atma, which means soul, and Paramatma, the Supreme Soul. So there is a divine higher spirit that is your co-pilot, that is sojourning all along with you in this life and throughout all your lifetimes. You can just take a deep breath and allow yourself to acknowledge that presence. And as we sing just a few times, we want to commit ourselves towards fanning that spark, fanning that divine spark in the heart, whether it's through our sangha, our spiritual relationships, our sadhana, our spiritual practice of meditation or reading or studying, or our seva, our service. These 3 very powerful needs of spiritual progress. Sadhana, sangha, and seva. Sadhana, the spiritual practice that we do. Sangha, the spiritual relationships that we keep, and seva, the service that we perform, however small or grand that may be. I'll sing once just to open the space, and then you guys can sing just 2 or 3 times with me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, one more time together, one loud voice together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Everybody take one deep inhale through the nose. Just let something out through the mouth. Slow release. One more deep inhale through the nose. And you can release something out through the mouth with a sound. And breathe easy, and we'll have one loud, resounding, collective sound of the universal syllable Om together to close out our space. Everybody take a deep breath in. And together. Take a moment to move your breath into vibrations in the room. And whenever you're ready, you can slowly flutter open your eyes, and turn to your left and your right, and front and back, and thank your neighbor for being here. Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you, everybody, so much. I'm grateful to all of you.
Thank you so much, Dayal. Thank you.